Okay, so let's talk about Amendment 64 maybe a little more. Um, There are lots of sub-issues, subplots, if you will, around the amendment. And let's start maybe with what it's not, in terms of ALCC's position, at least. ALCC is really not in a position to take a social position on this, and that's really not what we, as companies, really should be doing as much either. It's really more a question of how it affects the way the business runs every day. And there's a couple of things that come to my mind, at least, when you think about how things like Amendment 64 affect day-to-day business. So, number one is really around the idea of risk. And I know if you're like I am, you spend a lot of your time thinking about how to mitigate risk, how to reduce risk for the business, and still make profit. And those are challenges. And there are people challenges, there are equipment challenges, there are contract challenges. And this is just one more of those challenges. So when you place people in heavy equipment, in vehicles that are going down the road with 10 or 20,000 pounds on them, in the public's, kind of sort of in the public right-of-way and that sort of thing, that's a risk. So there are some inherent risks in our business. And the sense that we've had on the board of ALCC, and a lot of you have chimed in on this as well, is that the employer should have rights to determine how they mitigate their own risk. And if in fact they determine that a drug-free culture is what they're looking for, then they should be able to do that. And that's really a lot of where we really come down in terms of how we look at Amendment 64. And so maybe a second thing that I just alluded to is the idea of culture. And culture is as individual as every company in town. And we all build a culture very specifically, and sometimes accidentally, but either way, we all have unique cultures. And many of us have said we want to have a drug-free environment as part of our culture. That's just what we value, and we think that that's important for our people. So once again, that goes back to the same point, which is the company should have the right to develop its own culture. So there's certainly other things that come into play with this, but those are two that really stick out to me, which is the first being risk mitigation and the second being culture development. So when you think about Amendment 64, think about more than whether or not you agree that people should be allowed to use marijuana or not. That's really sort of a subset to this. And as it affects business, it's maybe some different things than the overriding social impact. So anyway.